The Holy Gospel for this day from the 14th chapter of St. Matthew.
Glory to you, O God.
Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. Can you hear me okay all the way to the back of the church? Can you hear me? Good. Good. Well, I'm delighted to be here with you this morning. It's a great joy to be back with old friends. As many as you know, I served at Beautiful Savior just down the road for many years, and Beautiful Savior and Immanuel over the years have done lots of things together. So it's good to be back with you. And I bring you greetings from all 90 congregations of our Southwestern Washington Synod. You are one of the southernmost congregations in our synod. You're just a few blocks from the Columbia River. So our synod starts at the Columbia River and moves up I-5 through Tacoma as far as Federal Way and Auburn and Enumclaw towards the mountains. Then our synod scoops around and includes the whole Olympic Peninsula. It goes all the way up to Sequim and Port Angeles and Port Townsend. So our Southwestern Washington Synod goes from the Columbia up to Canada, and it goes from the mountains to the coast. And we not only in our synod are the ministry of each one of you in your congregations, but we do some important ministries together. And so, for example, Lutheran Community Services Northwest has 4 offices throughout our synod and cares for young people, cares for elderly people. Also, we have a great educational ministry that we do together in our synod. Pacific Lutheran University is part of our ministry, and there are particular ministries to seniors and youth in the Tacoma Lutheran Retirement Center and Martha and Mary Ministries in Paulsville. So we're just very active in this, and I appreciate so much the ministry that you do here. And I'm particularly excited to be here with you today on this celebration day, celebrating your ministry here and in the community, celebrating the wonderful renewal you've done to your building here. I'll say more about that later, but it's just good to be with you today. I'm going to try something new today in a service. As you're listening to my sermon, think to yourself, what would be a good title for this sermon? I haven't written out a title, so I don't have one set in advance. So you listen to what I'm saying and think about what would be a good title for the sermon. And then on the way out the door, tell me what you think the title will be, and I will learn from you kind of what came across in the sermon. That will help me too. Well, our gospel lesson this morning is the very dramatic story of Jesus walking on the water. What's interesting in Matthew's gospel is that there are 2 stories of Jesus and the disciples in a storm on the Sea of Galilee. Back in chapter 8, so today's gospel is chapter 14, but back in chapter 8, there was another storm scene on the Sea of Galilee. In that story, Jesus was in the boat with the disciples. They were returning from one side of the sea to the other. A big storm came up, but Jesus was asleep in the stern of the ship And so the disciples got very frightened for their lives, and they shook Jesus awake, and they said, "Lord, do you care if we perish or not?" And of course, the Lord did care whether they were going to perish or not. So Jesus immediately calmed the storm and settled them down and made them feel safe again in the boat. So in that story, Jesus is one who saved them from the storm around them. In this gospel lesson today, the point, the direction is almost opposite of what Jesus does. Because in this story today, Jesus actually invites Peter to get out of the safety of the boat and come into the storm with him. Let's look at how that text goes. Jesus and the disciples are returning from the far side of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus had just fed the 5,000 people. That's what you heard last week in the gospel lesson. And so Jesus sends the disciples on ahead in a boat to cross back to home. Jesus wants some alone time. He wants some prayer time, so he goes up to the hills to pray. And the disciples are sailing. They're trying to sail and trying to row their way across, but this big storm comes up, and they're facing a headwind, so as much as they row, they can't get across. And they begin to worry they're going to sink again. And this time they see someone or something walking towards them on the water. In fact, they're afraid that it's a ghost, in fact. But Jesus then calms them down. He says, "Peace be to you. It's me. Don't be afraid." Jesus in the Gospels is always telling people, don't be afraid, because we get into very fearful situations. But the disciples maybe still aren't entirely convinced, because that's when Peter says, "Lord, if it's you, if it's really you, command me to come out of the boat and walk towards you on the water." Now, why would Peter say that? If he's wanting some kind of proof that it's really Jesus, why would he ask Jesus to urge him to get out of the boat? Well, I think Peter knew, having traveled with Jesus for a long time, that Jesus often invited the disciples to follow him into a risky and dangerous place. So for example, when Jesus was healing people, Jesus would touch lepers. Now that's a risky and dangerous thing to do, to touch a leper. But Jesus would invite his disciples to heal people and laying on their hands to heal them. Or Jesus defied the religious authorities by healing people on the day of the Sabbath. And that's a risky, dangerous thing to do, to defy the religious authorities. In fact, it's part of what got him killed. But he did that. So Peter knew that there's just something about following Jesus, that there are times when Jesus invites you to get out of the boat into a risky place, because that's where Jesus walked. That's where Jesus walked, to go out to where people were, to go out to people in their real places of trouble and to heal them and to feed them and to comfort them. And so Peter got out and walked on the water. So we've got two texts, one in chapter 8, one in chapter 14. Two texts that really have different themes. And one, Jesus comforts people and brings them into the boat. And the second one, Jesus challenges people and brings them out of the boat. Why are there two texts saying different things? Well, I think it's because life has all those different experiences. Life has those different experiences. And sometimes we need to be comforted. And sometimes we need to be challenged and get out of the boat. I think all of us can relate to times that are scary, when we feel like we're in a storm and really, really need to be comforted by Christ. So for example, when we're going through a time of sickness, and we really need to be comforted. When we're going through some financial scare in our lives, that something all of a sudden is uncertain financially. Or when there's some problems within our family and we're wondering how we're going to get along. So in our personal lives, we can feel in a time of storm. In our world, we can feel like we're in a time of storm. This past weekend with the tragic events in Charlottesville, Virginia, and protests and hate groups, and then people getting hit by a car. We live in a world that's stormy at times. And so it really is such a wonderful promise, such a wonderful act of grace that Jesus is with us and that Jesus cares for us and is with us to gather us into the boat in those times of storm. And there are also times when maybe we get too comfortable or too settled. And Jesus actually invites us out of the safety of the boat to walk out into the world with him, to bring comfort to others, to bring care for others. After the sermon today, we're going to sing the hymn, Spirit of Gentleness. Spirit of Gentleness. We would like a spirit of gentleness. But then in the hymn, we're going to sing, Spirit of Gentleness, save me from placidness. Spirit of restlessness, stir me up. You can wait for that hymn that we're going to sing. There are times when, to be fully alive in Christ, we need to get out of the boat and carry God's peace to others. And again, Jesus did that. There were times when he got the disciples out of the boat. Think, for example, in John's Gospel, when it was in the evening of the first Easter day, and remember the disciples they had locked themselves into a room, an upper room in Jerusalem. They were scared. They had a right to be scared. So they thought the only safe place to be would be to lock ourselves. Let's get some peace. Let's get some safety inside this room. And Jesus came in and he did give them peace. He breathed on them and said, "Peace to you." Then he said, "Even as the Father has sent me, so now I send you." I'm going to send you out of this room. I'm going to send you back into the world so you can bring that peace to others. Sometimes we need peace, and sometimes we need to be stirred up by Christ to bring that peace to others. Well, what do you need today? Which of those two things do you need today? I'm guessing all of us could answer that question differently because it depends on where we're at in this particular moment. It depends on what's going on in our life. There are, as I said before, there are some moments when things are in a lot of turmoil and we really need Christ's peace, and Christ is there to comfort us and to strengthen us. And then at other times in our lives, we need to have something more happening in our lives. We need to follow Jesus out into the world. There's something very delightful that's happening right now. 4 young people from our synod, 4 young people who just graduated from college, are volunteers with what we call in our church-wide at the ELC, we call it the Young Adults in Global Mission. We call them YAGMs for short, Young Adults in Global Mission. And each year, a number of Lutheran students from our congregations volunteer to go to different parts of the world to help carry out a ministry there. They work with whatever part of the Lutheran church is there to help run the church program, help run a youth program, help run a health clinic, help run a teaching educational ministry. And so there are 4 students from our synod. I'm going to hold up the paper to get their names. Hannah and Grace and Quinn and Malin, who are from different congregations in our synod. And they are going to Jerusalem, Madagascar, Senegal, and Argentina, going out into the world. Now, are Jerusalem, Senegal, Argentina, and Madagascar necessarily safe, comfortable places for them to go? I don't think so, not always. So if I was their parent or if I was their grandparent, I would be partly delighted that they are going, and I would partly be praying day and night that they stay safe. But this is how they feel called. I should add that in each location there are Lutheran representatives that have taken very good precautions to help them stay safe. So there are communities there are safe houses for them to live in, there are people from those countries, people from Jerusalem, Madagascar, who take good care of them. But there are risks. But sometimes these young people, they're graduating from college, and they're saying, God has given me so much, now I want to serve God. And so they answer the call to get out of the boat and go out into the world. When we follow Christ, when we walk with Christ, we know that Jesus walks in stormy places. And so we follow him into those places. This last weekend, 2 of the other bishops in the ELCA, Bishop Mani, the Bishop of Virginia, and Bishop Gold, the Bishop of Maryland, West Virginia, were in Charlottesville. They were part of a group of about 1,000 religious people, 1,000 people of faith, including a lot of Lutherans, who wanted to be there as an alternative to the Ku Klux Klan and the Nazi sympathizers who were there speaking their words of hate. These were the Lutherans and the Episcopalians and the Methodists, these were peaceful protesters. They surrounded the scene to sing hymns, pray prayers. Unfortunately, violence broke out, and very tragically, someone was hit by a car, and there was a death and there were injuries. So was that a safe place for them to go? No, it wasn't a safe place for them to go, and they invited our prayers ahead of time. They sent emails ahead of time saying, please pray for us. They just knew that if you're going to follow Jesus, then you're going to both give thanks for the fact that in times of trouble, Christ invites us into a place of safety, for security, for healing, for prayer. But then as we've been fed and strengthened, then Jesus invites us to get out of the boat and go into the world, even in places of storm and turmoil, because that's where the peace of God needs to arrive. That's where the healing power of Christ needs to come. And so they were willing to follow that ministry. I would like to congratulate you here at Immanuel. I'd like to really applaud you here at Immanuel, because you have followed Jesus in both directions of action. You have followed Jesus and have become a community, have been for many years, but have reaffirmed again that you are a community where people come for safety and to be nurtured by God. You have built here a congregation where people can come through the door, where you can come through the door on a Sunday morning, but everybody can come through the door and know that you're welcomed in as a child of God, that you are God's beloved, and that you want people to experience that. So on the one hand, you have been like Jesus in chapter 8 of welcoming people into the boat for a time of healing. But you also are like Peter and Jesus in chapter 14, where like Peter, you're willing to leave the boat and go out into the world, go out in your neighborhood and see who the people are and be in ministry with them. You're doing both. And today is a wonderful celebration of that. Today is a wonderful celebration of that. You have spent time and energy fixing up your boat, both as a place to welcome people, but a place to step out from into the world. I'm using that word boat very intentionally because think back to the traditional names for a church building. What's the traditional name for what they call this part of the church where you're all sitting?
Sanctuary.
The whole thing is a sanctuary.
Oh.
But the entryway is the narthex. This is the chancel. What's this middle part called? Nave. Nave. N-A-V-E, which in Old Latin, what do you guess it means? A boat means boat. Like we get the word navy, okay? The word navy is all about ships. They don't say boats in the Navy, all about ships. You are sitting in the boat of the church to be nurtured by God. Christ has gathered you here. So you've done a marvelous job. We're going to expand now, include the whole building as that nave, as that ship. You have chosen to say, we at Immanuel, we really celebrate Immanuel, God with us. We celebrate God with us. And so you have collected together, you have contributed a wonderful amount of money and put in time and energy to make your place here even more welcoming, even more warming, and even more comforting. And you've put in new flooring, and you've painted the walls, and you've put in new doors with glass windows to make things safe and secure. You take seriously the fact that, first of all, God has welcomed you. You're going to welcome others. There have been times, perhaps over the last few years, when you wondered about Immanuel and wondered what the future would be. But you're saying today, we are the people of Immanuel, God with us, and we are here, and we're staying here, and we're going to be in ministry, and I applaud you for that. A big part of your renewal project has been putting in a new parking lot. You repaved the parking lot. I love new parking lots. I love newly paved parking lot. I don't know if it's a guy thing or not, but I love driving in. You see the deep, dark blue of the asphalt, and you got those nice white lines that show you exactly where to park. And so I always feel like the world is in order when there's a new parking lot, and that it's welcome for me. I really like that about parking lots. Well, the parking lot is interesting when we think about Matthew 8, Matthew 14. On the one hand, the parking lot is part of that welcoming. There's a place for you here. We want you to be here. We want to welcome you into our place of God's power. The parking lot, though, is also the staging area for going back out into the world. You're done with worship here, and you get in that parking lot, and you go back out into the world. You've actually used your parking lot as one of the avenues by which you go out and welcome people and do ministry to other people. Pastor Adrienne told me the delightful stories about how the last 2 4ths of July, you've had parties for the whole neighborhood out in your parking lot. It's a place where you welcome your neighbors, and you all come, and your neighbors come, and your friends come. Now, on the 4th of July, with lots of things exploding in the air, it might make more sense to just stay inside and be safe, right? But you're willing to go out there, like Peter going out in the storm. You're willing to go out there where the explosions are, but to meet people and to gather people and to welcome people. And then you also expanded that into potlucks that you'd have throughout the year, in which you would not only invite yourself, but you'd invite your neighbors. And you're just now, as part of your whole commitment to renewal at Immanuel, you're beginning a 6-month process of really meeting your neighbors, finding out who are in the neighborhood and who are they and what are their needs and what are their gifts. You're going to really put yourself out there like St. Peter, going to step out of the boat and go out and meet your neighbors. Now that can be kind of challenging. That can be kind of daunting at times. It's kind of, for a lot of us who are a little shy about meeting new people, it can be a little tricky. I remember the very first time I went to a dance in high school, and I just sort of stayed back by the wall the whole dance because it was just too hard for me to go introduce myself to anybody. So sometimes we're a little daunted, we're a little bit hesitant. But you have let the Spirit of gentleness, the Holy Spirit who has fed you and comforted you, you've also let that Spirit be a spirit of restlessness that says, I want to follow Jesus. I want to walk with Jesus. And that means I'm going to walk out into the world. Whatever the storms, I'm going to walk out in the world. Because that's where Jesus wants to go, bringing the word of peace. So I congratulate you today. I rejoice with you as you celebrate this ministry, both of being a gathering place where all are welcome and where all experience the grace and the love of God, but also letting that strengthen you to reach out in ministry to your community. And I want to promise you something very important, and that is that you are not alone as you do this. You are not alone. Life feels lonely and overwhelming sometimes, but you are not alone. For starters, the most important ingredient is that God is with you. God is with you. That's the common element in both these stories. Jesus was there. Jesus was there with the disciples, in the boat and out of the boat. Jesus was there in the storms. God is with you in this. And also, you're not alone because you have each other. You have this wonderful community of members here at Immanuel, and you're together in ministry, and you're together in prayer, and you're together in worship. So you're together, you're not alone. And you also have all 90 congregations of our Southwestern Washington Synod with you. That's why we're a synod. We join together in these geographical areas, because ministry is too complicated to do by ourselves. So we're together in this. And our synod wants to continue to support you in every way. I know that my staff person, Pastor Melanie Walschlager, has been with you a number of times to help you out as you're going through the renewal process. And funding has come from the synod, so that 12 congregations right now are going through the Imagine renewal process. So the synod is with you. And in our synod, we're not just alone in our synod either. We're part of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. There are 65 synods. It's not just 90 congregations here, but it's more than 9,000 congregations around the United States. We are together because we have been brought to the table by Jesus Christ and given life. And then it's not just the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. We're part of the Lutheran World Federation. We're part of a community of 80 million Lutherans in 97 countries around the world. We're together. And that's just the Lutheran family. There's far more to God's family than just us Lutherans. God has brought us together, first to nurture us and to care for us in the boat, and then send us out into the world in care. So I'd like to invite you this coming week to practice a spiritual discipline that comes from this text this morning. Spiritual discipline. This week, do something risky and dangerous for Jesus. I'm not talking about driving 90 miles an hour on a plane. Do something risky and dangerous for Jesus. Open your heart to someone. Talk to someone you've never talked to before. Befriend a stranger. Ask yourself, what is God's dream for us in the world right now? What's God's dreams for this neighborhood, and how can I be a part of that dream? Do something risky and dangerous for Jesus. I can't guarantee you that you will be alive to the end of the week. We never know how many days we have. I can guarantee you that each day that you live, you will be fully alive because you invited the Spirit of Christ to be the Spirit that guides you and shapes you. Walk with Jesus, even into the storm, because where Jesus is, there is life. There is life. May God bless you. May God bless you. And each day, and as a congregation, as you live as God's people in this place. Amen.
Yep.